I wanted to mention, what is the idea of a baskoil? What is the idea of a heavenly voice? There are heavenly voices, and most people don't even hear these heavenly voices. Of course, Rabbi Yossi was on a whole different league. He was speaking to Elijah, so he heard the heavenly voice, the baskoil, and these baskoils that are, the Gemara is saying that it's 3 times a day, and whenever people are saying Yehesh Me Rabbah, what is the purpose of a baskoil? And if we don't hear it, so why is it echoing? And so it's brought down that really our neshama hears it. We don't hear it, but in the depths of our soul does hear it, and it actually affects the soul. It encourages the soul it gives it inspiration, or it stimulates the soul. So the soul becomes affected by that baskoil, and that's the purpose of a baskoil. So even though we don't on a conscious level feel it, but it does develop into it ends up having an effect on us because it affects our neshama, and then our neshama affects us. So we might not hear the baskoil, but it ends up ultimately having an effect on us. So that's where we are holding. We're in the bottom by the 2 dots, two lines up from the bottom of the page. And the Gemara now brings a brisa, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. Generally, whenever it says Tanu Rabbanan, it refers to a brisa that was studied by Rabbi Oishia and Rabbi Chia. That's the common understanding why it says Tanu Rabbanan and not Tanya. That it's hinting to you that the rabbis learned that it's a type of a brisa, not just the regular brisa. So this brisa says, because of 3 things, we do not enter into a churva, a ruin. Now, what the first thing you have to realize is there's a reason why this brisa is being brought here. In other words, we're talking, the Gemara here is trying to explain the Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about Shema. So how does this brisa fall into place? And the answer is, well, we were speaking about Shema. We got sidetracked and we spoke about the Mishma. Well, not really sidetracked, but it ended up being connected to the idea of Mishmaros, of the watchings. And we spoke about the entering of that Rabbi Yossi entered into this ruin in order to daven, and once we spoke about the ruin and we learned about the laws about you shouldn't go into a ruin, you can daven on the road, and you should daven Havinenu. So once we learned about that, the Gemara now tells us that another brisa about a ruin, a brisa about the not entering into the ruin. Actually, what this awakens is the question of the previous Gemara. We really should have asked, how does the previous Gemara fit in? Why does it tell us that story here that he was about davening in a ruin? And how does that connected to the previous Gemara? That's really what we should be asking. Does anyone want to answer that question? The previous Gemara spoke about Rabbi Yossi entering a ruin to daven. I mean, our Gemara should be talking about Shema. Howard, you want to tell us?
The connection that I see is it's about the Mishmaros. We were learning about having, the time of Kriya Shema was related to the Mishmaros, and we learned that there were, I think, 3 Mishmaros according to most opinions. So therefore, this story also talks about the Mishmaros. So that seems to be the connection to me.
So where do we see the Mishmaros in the story? Because the story, what you're getting at is the end of the story where he says, "What did you hear in the ruin?" And he says, "The sound of a dove cooing and saying, 'Woe is to my children that because of their sins I had to destroy the Beis Hamikdash.'" And that is the same idea that Hashem cries over the Beis Hamikdash with the Mishmarei. So that's what you're getting at. I just wanted to develop your thought.
Yeah, I see the words Shalosh Pa'amim Omeres Kach. That
right.
So that's again the three Mishmaros, which seems to be the connection, according to some opinions, about the time of Kriya Shema.
Right. So okay. So I think it's more than just the Mishmaros. It's that whole idea that Hashem is crying during those Mishmaros as well. I think that's what you meant.
As well, yes.
In addition to the fact that it says 3 times. But that's the connection of that Gemara to here. And now this Gemara is a continuation of that Gemara, because this Gemara now tells us a little more about the idea of entering into a ruin. So let me start again. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned, we're 2 lines up from the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned, because of 3 reasons, ein nechnasim lechurba, we are not supposed to enter into a ruin. Mipnei chashad, because of the being suspected of entering in order to meet up with a harlot. So the reason a person should not enter into a ruin is because it will look bad. It'll look like maybe you're entering in order to meet up with a harlot. So people are going to say things. It's a chashad. People are going to suspect you. So you shouldn't bring yourself into being suspected by others. Mipnei hamapelas, the second reason is because the wall might fall down. And so you're not allowed to do something that's dangerous. And one of those things that would be dangerous would be entering into a ruin, because we assume that a ruin is not it's old. It's very possible that it'll collapse. And the third reason is umapnei hamazikin, because of the mazikin. Mazikin are demons that we are, which also is, I guess, for safety. That's why you shouldn't enter there, because in ruins that's where the demons hang out. And these are the 3 reasons why we should not enter a ruin. So the Gemara is a little surprised that you would have 3 reasons, because what do you need 3 reasons for? It must be, if the Gemara is saying there are 3 reasons, it must be because there are times when not all of the reasons would apply. And therefore, we need 3 reasons, because if the first reason doesn't apply, but you still have the second reason. If the second reason doesn't apply, you still have the third reason. So each of these reasons must be a reason in their own right, and they apply in certain scenarios. Howard, you have a question?
Just briefly, I know it may be complicated, but this idea of mazikin, of demons, is there an understanding of why they hang out in ruins?
Yeah, I'm not so knowledgeable in the field of demons. So, I mean, it would seem that they were given certain allowances from heaven where to hang out. And one of them is where people don't populate, maybe. So since it's not common for, since people aren't there, that would be my understanding. I don't know if anyone else here knows a little more about demons than I do. If anyone wants to share any thoughts, David.
I asked, hello. Yeah, I asked my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Goldberg, when I was in yeshiva back in the 70s. So I asked him, how come it says in the Gemara that if you put, I forget what it is, like powder around your bed, and you wake up in the morning, you'll see these demon footprints in the powder. You know what I'm referring to,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he said to me that it's accepted that since the time of the Baal Shem Tov, the incidence of demons is much, much less than it was originally. And therefore, that's why we don't see these things readily as they saw them in past generations.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you for adding that to our knowledge of demons. Any other anyone else know anything about demons according to Jewish tradition?
What about ghost towns in America? A lot of people like to visit ghost towns. So are we to understand that the Jews should not go visit ghost towns in America? There's a lot of history there that they might be missing out.
Uh-huh.
If they, didn't go visit these ruins, maybe not walk into a ruin, but, just stay out on the highway and, just see from the outside what they look like. There's probably not much of an inside.
Yeah, good question. What it seems like from this Gemara is that it's not like there are cities you're not allowed to go to, you shouldn't go to. It seems like each building, would have its own. I don't know for sure, but maybe it seems like the chorva, each ruin might be judged on its own. Maybe I guess you could say maybe a whole city would be considered if it's a city of ruins. Would the whole city would they take over the whole city, or would they just hang out in the ruins? I don't know. It's a good question.
The calendar that was just published by the World Jewish Congress has for October a ruin of a synagogue on Cape Verde Island. And, you don't have to really walk into it to see it. It doesn't. It's just a skeleton of whatever it was. Doesn't even have an outer shell to it. You can almost look at it and just say, okay, there's where the bima was, and there's where the mechitza was, and not much else.
Right. The only thing I'm thinking is there is a Gemara that says an interesting story where there was a place that there were demons that would come in, and somehow I don't remember the Gemara so clearly. I think it's in Baba Kama, where one of the rabbis somehow advised another rabbi. He didn't tell him about the demons that are there. He said, you should go there and pray over there, or study over there. Anyway, when that rabbi went there, miraculously he was able to, his life was saved because of his holiness. So he came back to the other rabbi. He says, you risked my life by going there. He said, no, I know you're so holy that they won't have an effect on you, and you'll be able to get rid of them. So there is some idea that the holiness of a person can will save them, of course, from the demons, and maybe even remove the demons from the place. So that's the only other thing that comes to mind. In any event, okay, so we have these three reasons about not entering a ruin, and as I mentioned, each one must be applicable in certain scenarios, and that's why the Gemara brings three. So so the Gemara says mipnei chashad, because of the being suspected, that reason, but typically, and let's learn it out that a person shouldn't go there because of the other reason, mishum apelas. In other words, what do we need the reason of mipnei chashad, because of being suspected? Let's learn out from the reason of mapelas, of that we're afraid of it falling down. That should be enough of a reason to prohibit entering into a chorva, into a ruin. And now we're turning the page. We're now on page 3, side B. So the Gemara answers bechadati. Bechadati means it's a new ruin. And what this means is that they rebuilt the walls, and one of the walls fell down. And the reason it fell, we assume, is because they messed up with their engineering. They did something wrong and caused one of the walls to fall, but the other walls are now intact. And because the other walls are intact, we assume that the wall that fell was obviously a mistake that they, in their building. In other words, it's not that it's very old because they just rebuilt it. They just fixed the walls up. They renovated these walls. But one of them that fell right after they renovated, obviously they messed up something majorly in that wall. But the other walls are solid. So because of that, we're not afraid that they're going to fall down. Because if it would have fallen together with this other wall. So that's the Gemara's answer, that if it's talking about a new ruin, it was a renewed ruin. So therefore, we're not afraid that it's going to fall, but we are afraid that someone will think that maybe maybe someone is meeting up with a harlot. And therefore, person should not enter into such a ruin. So the Gemara says, but typically, and let's learn out that you shouldn't enter such a ruin, mishum mazikin, because of the demons. What about the demons? You shouldn't enter because of demons. Forget about because of being suspected for a sin. Maybe because of demons you shouldn't enter. That's good enough. Let us just say that reason. So the Gemara answers betray. It's talking about two men. If there's two men entering such a place, you don't have to worry of demons. If it's one person, then we would be afraid of demons. If it's two, we do not have to worry about demons. So basically what the Gemara is saying is that we're talking about you're entering a ruin that is renewed, and therefore it's not going to fall, and you're two people, and therefore we don't have to worry about demons, and we're still telling you don't enter. And the reason we're telling you don't enter is because we're afraid that people will say something because you'll be suspected of meeting up with a harlot. So the Gemara says, if it's two people, two men, we don't betray chshad nami leka. If it's two men, then there's no being suspected of meeting up with a harlot, because two men, each one is embarrassed of the other one to sin. So if this is the scenario, then we should allow you to enter such a ruin, because number one, you don't have a problem that it's going to fall because it's a renewed ruin. You don't have a problem of demons because you're two men, and you don't have a problem of being suspected of sinning, of going there for sin because you're two men. So the Gemara is asking, so where is the scenario that you're going to need to have the reason of being suspected? In this scenario, you shouldn't even be allowed. So the Gemara answers no. Two men are not always allowed to enter a place that there might be a woman. If the two men are considered pritzi means they are, I don't know, good translation. They're not righteous. They're a little like lower level morality, low morals. So low moral people, if those two people are low moral people, they would not be allowed to enter a ruin if we're afraid maybe there's a harlot there and people will now speak about them. So basically, the law of yichud, the law of secluding oneself in a place with a woman, we know is prohibited. A man is not allowed to go to a room that there's a woman there and closing the door. That would be considered yichud, even if they don't sin. but it's called yichud. However, if it's two men, generally they're allowed to go. Like, so let's say there's an office and there's a woman in the office, and you're entering. So if you're the only person, it's not allowed because of yichud. If you're going to close the door and lock the door and so on, it would be prohibited. But if you're two men, then it's not a problem. It's not a problem of yichud. But if the two men are pritzi, if they're considered a low level of morality, then even two men would not be a leniency to enter such a location, and that would be considered yichud. It's interesting because there's a whole discussion of what is considered someone who's not righteous and not a low level of morality, someone who's in between, just a regular person. Would we consider him to be from the righteous, and two people would be allowed, or do we consider regular people to be more on the pritzi side, and that they wouldn't be allowed? And it's a machlekes among in the codifiers, in the code of law, and it creates numerous problems of how a person can go to. For number one, are you allowed to be in an elevator if there's only one woman there, and you're or if there's a woman allowed to be in an elevator where there's one man there? Generally, an elevator is not a problem because there's always potential that someone's going to be entering, and you don't have enough time to sin. In other words, there's a certain time amount that would be considered the prohibited amount of time of yichud. And so, being that by the time, the elevator could theoretically, someone could get on the next floor, so it's not it wouldn't be considered a problem. But of course, there are numerous problems entering into an office, and if it's not a busy office, if it's not an office where people normally enter, it could be problematic. And of course, going to a doctor, and these are issues that have to be dealt with. Often the major issues are having babysitters when you have older boys and you have a woman babysitter, or and so on, and then of course other issues are as well, having a cleaning lady. If you have a cleaning lady and you're in the house and so on, or that's also, or having a worker in your house, and you're a woman and the worker is a man, and your husband's, let's say, now there is a leniencies if the husband's in town, so he might come home any moment, but what happens if he's out of town? And so these are all different issues that are dealt with regard to yichud. I'm not going to get into the laws because we're learning the Gemara, but I'm just sharing with you this Gemara mentions this idea of two men is a potential leniency if there's two men, but it doesn't apply if they don't have a high or at least a regular standard of morality. If they're pritzi, then two men doesn't work. So the Gemara concluded here that the reason why you're not allowed to enter a ruin could be because of being suspected of sinning with a harlot. And person should not should not bring himself to be suspected. And so there could be such a scenario where they would be suspected, and that would be a case where it's a renewed walls, and it's two men, but they're pritzi. So that's the case where we need the reason of being suspected. What about the reason of mapelis? Mipnei hamapelis. We're now in the second line of the Gemara. Mipnei hamapelis, because of the walls falling down. But typically, and let's learn out that you're not allowed to enter this ruin, not because of the walls falling down. Let's learn it out from the fact that you can't enter because of chashad, because of being suspected, umazikin, and because of the demons. Let's say that's the reason. And we don't need the reason of the walls falling down. So the Gemara answers, we're talking about a scenario, betray uksheri, that we're talking about there's two men, and they're both kosher men, which means that they are righteous, and we don't have to worry about the reason of chashad. We don't have to worry about the reason of chashad, that they're going to be suspected. We don't have to worry about the reason of mazikin, which means the demons, because it's two people. And the only thing that we're worried about is that the walls might fall down. So in this scenario, that is the problem, and therefore you're not allowed to enter a ruin because you're risking your life. You're not allowed to do something that's dangerous. Now the Gemara says the third reason, because of demons. Now, what do you need the reason of? Because of demons? But typically, let's learn out that you're not allowed to enter a ruin. You have the reason of being suspected and the reason of mapailas, of the walls falling down. And so what do you need the reason of the demons? So the Gemara answers, we're talking about b'chor v'charati. It's a renewed ruin. So therefore, we're not worried that the walls are going to fall down. Ubetrei, and we're talking about two people. So therefore, uksheri, therefore, we don't have to worry about the chashad, the being suspected, because they're trei uksheri. And we do have to worry about the mazikin. Now the question is, what do you mean? Why do we have to worry about mazikin if we're talking about two people? Two people, you don't have to worry about mazikin. Ibetrei mazikin nami leka. If with two people, you don't have to worry about demons. So the Gemara answers, bimkoimon chayshinon. If it's their area, that's when we are worried. Now, what does it mean, bimkoimon chayshinon? In their place, we are worried. So the translation that Rashi gives is that in their place means, Rashi says, in a place where they are there often. And Taisus also says, Yodua, we know that they are commonly there. So that's when we are worried about mazikin, even if you have two people. If we don't know that they're there, we don't see them, we don't hear noises from this ruin often, so then we don't know that there are demons there. Two people is allowed to enter. But if we hear noises and howling and who knows what from this ruin, then, even two people are not allowed to enter, and therefore you're not allowed to enter a ruin, not because of chashad, because you're two people, you're ksherim. You don't have to, it's not because it's going to fall down, but we're afraid because of the demons, because it's in their place where they're used to, where they're often there, then we're worried. The ibayasema, and if you want, you can say, li oilam, really, bechad, we're talking about, it's one person. Uvachor v'chadati. And we're talking about a renewed ruin. Dekoi bedabra, that it is standing in the field. No, it's not in a populated area. It's in a rural area in the field. The hasam mishum chashad leka. There, we're not worried about chashad. No one's going to say you're entering there because you're going to meet up with a harlot, because the harlots hang out in the populated cities where there's more business. And the isha bedabra leishchicha, a woman is not commonly in the field. Umishum mazikin ika, but we are worried about mazikin, that there may be demons there. So that would be the reason of demons, that we're talking about one person. We're not worried about being suspected, because women don't hang out in the fields. It's also dangerous, I guess, for women in the fields. And we're not worried about that the walls are going to fall down, because this is a renewed ruin. But we are worried that that there are demons there, and you're one person, and something could happen from the demons. So that is the conclusion of this Gemara. Okay, now the Gemara.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
The temple is a ruin, and supposedly the best place to daven is a temple. Can you explain how this applies to this Gemara?
So that's a good question, especially because of the practical taking this Gemara, trying to make it practical. I don't know if I would call what the Gemara is referring to as a ruin the same as the Beis Hamikdash, meaning spiritually, the Beis Hamikdash is a ruin, but the idea that that what we're really talking about, at least the way I understand it, is we're talking about a ruin where, it's a place that people don't congregate there. People aren't around. It's been, it's been that way for years. There might be sounds and things that, it's a different type of a ruin than just the fact that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and there's, and you basically, you do have a wall. True, there's just a wall, but that wall was not the wall of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the wall of the wall around Yerushalayim. I'm sorry, the wall around the mountain, not the wall around Yerushalayim, but it's the wall around the mountain that was around the Beis Hamikdash. So it's not like a house that we have partially destroyed that we're hanging out. It was a wall of not of a house, not of a building, and it's a place where thousands of Jewish people congregate. So my thought is that it wouldn't be similar, but maybe other people have other thoughts. I don't know. What do you think? Anyone want to share their thoughts about that? It's a good question, William.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi? Yeah.
Yehuda? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a little dark in your room, so I don't see your lips moving. Yes.
No, with the Beis Hamikdash, you have it's not just two people. There's many people there, so I don't see where it fits in the same category.
So he's asking, maybe, like, let's say you go there in the middle of the night and you're the only person there at 2 o'clock in the morning. Would that be a problem? Because and it's especially valid because that wall, it's sort of like a ruin. I mean, I'm sure part of it, I guess part of it wasn't, isn't, or do you mean even on the mount, even on the actual mountain where the Beis Hamikdash was? If you walk up there, and would you call that the ruin, William, or you're just talking about the wall?
Oh.
Of the both. Uh-huh.
I mean, one thing I thought is maybe the reason you see the sign that Orthodox Jews aren't supposed to go on the mount because you're not supposed to dive in a ruin.
Ruin, right? No, I don't see it that way.
Well, you see that sign. The rabbis say you're not supposed to go there.
Right. Well, my understanding is that the reason you're not supposed to go there is because of the holiness of the place, and we don't have purity, the level of purity to be able to enter there. We would need to, purify ourselves, and we would need to purify ourselves with the red heifer, and we don't have a red heifer now to purify ourselves, and there's so much impurity even if you did the red heifer, and so it's because of that. At least that's my understanding. But thank you for bringing that up. We are going to continue, unless there's other questions. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question regarding when we visit the Kosel in Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
So I guess just to be clear, where are we standing in relation to the Beis Hamikdash? Are we standing by a ruin, or it's has a different something else?
Yeah, well, the wall that you stand, the Kosel wall is the wall around the mountain that the Beis Hamikdash stood on, and you're standing far from where the Beis Hamikdash was. You're even beyond the wall that was around the mountain, so you're not near the Beis Hamikdash. You're closer than in Florida, but you're not you're not standing where the Beis Hamikdash was. Okay, so now we're going to start with the Tanu Rabbanan, the next brisa, and we are about 8 or 9 lines from the top of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, yes.
Rabbi Schmidt.
Yeah, Reb Tuvia.
Yeah, when you go to Israel, it takes you to see a little bit the letter runes. How is that? That's not effective?
Well, so that's an interesting question. If they take you to see the ruins, so you have to figure out, number one, you're 2 people because you're going with whoever's taking you, and
with a group.
A group, and so you don't have the problem of the demons. because they're not taking you to a place where the demons are often there. So you don't have a problem with demons. And the problem of it falling down, I'm guessing that problem could be rectified if the engineers of the city are checking it and and clarifying that it's safe, almost like it's renewed. If they are, I'm sure the Department of Tourism is checking those out. And so the only issue you would have is chashad, and being suspected, and that also would probably not be not be a problem because you're with a few people, and two people is maybe a problem if people aren't righteous, but more than that should minimize the problem. So that would be the reason why shouldn't be an issue. But good question, Reb Tuvia. Thank you. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. We're now 9 lines from the top of the page.
If we go to ruins to visit, we should try not to daven there?
Well, it doesn't say that the davening doesn't work in a ruin.
No, but it says the reason of the whole thing was that you shouldn't daven with his ruins. They don't say you shouldn't go with his ruins, you shouldn't daven there, right? Just want to clarify this.
My understanding is that you shouldn't go there, not you shouldn't daven there. So if you look back, on the bottom of the page, the second to the bottom line, it said Ein nefnas in l'chorva. You simply should not enter. And on the previous Gemara, it also said, why did you enter a ruin? Implying, didn't say, why did you daven in a ruin? He said, why did you enter? And when Rabbi Yossi said back, he answered, I went there to daven, hoping maybe davening would be, maybe davening would be okay, but the initial question was, why did you enter? So that implies like the problem is all about entering, and all the reasons apply to entering. They don't seem to have any connection with davening in the ruin. If anything, davening, as I'm saying, davening would be a reason to think that it might be more permissible. In other words, my point to you is Rabbi Yossi, when he entered, why did he enter this ruin? Doesn't he know that it's dangerous? What was Rabbi Yossi thinking? And maybe this is what he was thinking. I'm going there to daven, so whatever negative, issues could harm me, my davening will answer them. So that would be my understanding. So I don't think it's connected to davening. I think it's really connected to, in general, entering. Sound good, William?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're just going to do a few lines of the next Gemara, and then we'll start the Tanya. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis learned, Arba Mishmaris Havi Alayla, Divrei Rebbe. The rabbis learned, this is actually part of the Tosefta. It's a brisa that's written down actually in the back of your Gemaras. Many of the Gemaras have printed the Toseftas. And the Tosefta is a volume that they gathered they gathered certain brisas together and put them in a organized publication. So the brisa says that there's 4 mishmaris, 4 watchings, Habi Alayla, at the night. Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. Reb Nassan Aimer Shalish. Reb Nassan says there are 3 mishmaris in the night. So until now, we really knew about the 3, the opinion of the 3. And what the Gemara now lets us hear is that there is a different opinion, that Rebbe, which is Rebbe Yehuda Hanasi, he holds there are 4 mishmaris in the night. My taima de Reb Nassan. What is the reason of Reb Nassan? Because it says, Vayava Gidoin, and Gidoin came, Umeya Ish, and 100 people, Asher Itoi, that were with him, Biktsei Hamachane, the edge of the camp, Roish Hoashmuras Hatichoina, the beginning of the middle watch. So we're trying to explain Reb Nassan's opinion. Reb Nassan said there's 3 watches in the night, and he brings a verse that talks about a middle watch. Now, if you say there's a middle watch, it sounds like there's got to be an odd number. If there's an odd number, then you could have a middle watch. If it's an even number, then you're going to have 2 middle watches. So, Tana ein tichena, ela sheyesh lefanao lachareha, and we learned that you can't have a middle unless you have something before it and something after it. So it must be that there are 3. Rebbe, and what does Rebbe say? How does Rebbe explain this verse? So it says, "My tichayna." What does it mean? The middle one. It means achas min hatichayna shebatichaynis. It means one of the middle watches. It doesn't mean the middle watch. It means one of the middle watches. So you got to add a little. It's not a perfect. It doesn't. The verse doesn't go so smoothly with Rebbe, but he obviously has a reason why he holds there are 4. And since he knows that there are 4 watches, he has to explain the verse in the non-literal sense. He has to change, he has to explain it a little more, add a little point that middle watch means one of the middle watches. And the Gemara says, Reb Nassan, what does Reb Nassan do with Rebbe's claim? He says, Mit ksiv tichayna shebetichaynas. The Reb Nassan argues with Rebbe. He says, does it say one of the middle watches? And tichayna ksiv, it says the middle one. So that is the beginning of this brisa, and tells us that there's 2 opinions, either 3 watches or 4 watches. Okay, we're going to now